They challenged the old man just to mess around. But when he stood up, silence took over. Walter Thompson felt the laughter echoing through the gym as he adjusted his hands on the cold bar of the equipment. The two young men kept betting out loud, not caring that he could hear every mocking word. That's when the taller of the two approached with that smirk. "So, Mr. Walter, we were just thinking, how much can you lift?" "About 20 pounds, asked Ryan, making sure to raise his voice so everyone around could hear. "I doubt even that," added the other, crossing his arms. "Look at his size. He must be about 70 years old, right, old man?" Walter didn't answer right away. He just watched them with that calm that came from someone who had seen a lot in life. Words didn't hurt him like they used to. He had learned that people like that needed to put others down to feel big. "How much do you lift?" he finally asked in a firm voice. Ryan let out a loud theatrical laugh. "Me? 80 pounds easy. Tyler here does 90. We're training for next month's competition, you know how it is." "Then give a demonstration," said Walter, still without changing his tone. The two exchanged glances with that sparkle in their eyes of someone who had just found guaranteed entertainment for the rest of the afternoon. Ryan was the first to position himself, adjusting the bar with the weights he had mentioned, with some visible effort, but nothing that seemed impossible for someone who trained regularly. He lifted the load above his head and held it for a few seconds before lowering it. "Your turn, old man," he taunted, still panting. "But take it easy, okay? We don't want you to get hurt and then have to explain it to Miss Hannah." Some people training nearby started to notice what was happening. A lady on the treadmill slowed down to watch. A young man doing sit-ups stopped in the middle of his set. The gym, which always had that constant noise of equipment and heavy breathing, became strangely quieter. Walter approached the bar. Without rushing, without showing any anxiety, he started adding more weight plates. Ryan and Tyler exchanged confused looks when they saw he wasn't reducing the load, but increasing it. Hey, hold on," said Tyler, stepping forward. "You're putting too much weight on. That's almost 350 pounds. "I know exactly how much I'm putting on," replied Walter, adjusting the last plate. There was a moment of tension. Ryan seemed torn between laughing at the situation and genuinely worried that the old man was about to get seriously hurt, right there in front of everyone. Tyler already had his phone in hand, probably thinking he'd need to call for emergency help in seconds. Walter positioned his hands on the bar. He took a deep breath once, twice, and then, in a movement that seemed surprisingly fluid for someone his age, he lifted all that load above his head. It wasn't a shaky or hesitant movement. It was solid, controlled. The bar went up as if it weighed half of what it actually did. The silence that took over the place was almost physical. Ryan stood with his mouth open, literally frozen mid-gesture. Tyler let his phone slip through his fingers and had to catch it before it hit the floor. The lady on the treadmill stopped running completely and stood there staring at the scene with wide eyes. Walter held the bar for 5 full seconds. Then he lowered it with the same precision with which he had lifted it, putting the weights back on the rack without making unnecessary noise. "Any more questions, Ma?" he said, wiping his hands on the towel he carried. No one answered. Ryan was still trying to process what he had just seen. Tyler stared at the barbell as if it were some kind of magical object that had behaved in an impossible way. That's when the voice came from the speakers scattered throughout the gym. "Ryan and Tyler, come to my office now." The voice of Hannah, the owner, cut through the silence like a blade. It wasn't request. It was an order. The two young men exchanged glances, and for the first time since Walter had started attending that gym 6 months ago, he saw something different in their faces. It was no longer the usual mockery. It was something close to fear. Walter grabbed his towel and his almost empty water bottle. He walked to the exit of the weightlifting area without looking back, without waiting for recognition or apologies. He hadn't done that for them. He had done it for himself, to prove something he already knew, but sometimes needed to be reminded of. That strength has no age. That respect isn't given based on appearance. That underestimating someone can be the biggest mistake a person makes. As he walked through the gym's hallways, Walter allowed his mind to wander to places he usually avoided visiting. The pain he carried wasn't physical. It didn't come from muscles or joints. It was something much deeper, something that not all the exercises in the world could completely relieve. 6 months ago, he still had a home. He had a different routine. He woke up in the bed he had shared with Margaret for 42 years, had coffee at the kitchen table, read the newspaper in the living room armchair. Simple things that seemed eternal until they ceased to exist. The argument with Pamela, his daughter, still echoed in his head some nights. Harsh words, accusations that seemed to come from a place of such deep pain that he didn't know how to reach it. She had said he was selfish, that he had kept everything to himself, that her mother's inheritance should be divided fairly, and that fairness meant selling the house and splitting the money. But that house wasn't just bricks and cement. It was where Pamela had taken her first steps. It was where Margaret had planted rose bushes that bloomed every October. It was where they had celebrated every birthday, every Christmas, every small victory in life. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now. Continuing, he had said no, and Pamela had stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the glass in the nearby window shook. That was 7 months ago. 7 months without hearing his only daughter's voice. 7 months carrying the weight of a decision that might have been wrong, but at the time seemed the only possible one. 3 weeks after that argument, the problems began. Bills he hadn't realized were overdue. Mail talking about debts that Margaret must have managed when she was alive, but had been forgotten. An avalanche of paper and numbers that made no sense to someone who had always left these matters in his wife's hands. He tried to fix it. He really tried. But every solution seemed to create 2 new problems. He fell behind, he lost control, and when he realized it, it was already too late. The house had to be sold anyway, hastily, for a price far below its actual worth. The money left over was barely enough to pay off the debts, and Walter found himself at 70 years old, without a home, without savings, without really knowing how he had reached that point. He tried to call Pamela. He tried several times, but she never answered. The messages went unanswered, and the pride they both carried, that damn pride that came from generations and generations of stubborn people, kept them separated by a chasm that seemed to grow wider every day. It was by chance that Walter discovered he could sleep at the gym. It wasn't a plan. It was a necessity that became a routine. He started going to the place because he needed something to do, somewhere to go during the day. The monthly fee he could pay with his retirement money. At least that. At least one thing that was just his and that no one could take away. One night he had stayed later, training alone when everyone had already left. The cleaning guy was a distracted young man who barely looked around before locking everything up and going home. Walter realized he had been forgotten inside when he tried to leave and found the doors already locked. His first reaction was panic. But then, sitting on the bench in the empty locker room, looking at the rows of lockers and the dim emergency lights, he thought, why not? The locker room was clean. It had showers. It had places to sit. And no one needed to know. He would wait until the morning staff opened the doors at 5, leave as if he had arrived early to train, and no one would suspect a thing. That had been 4 months ago. Since then, Walter had developed a careful routine. He trained normally during the day, like any regular customer. He showered in the late afternoon. Then he went to a discreet corner of the gym and pretended he was still training until the place emptied completely. The cleaning guy, whose name was Jake, was so predictable that Walter already knew exactly what time he finished and left. Then Walter would return to the locker room. He had an extra towel that he kept hidden in a locker that was never used. He had a bag with some clothes. Not too much, just the essentials. He had learned to be invisible, to leave no traces, to give no one any reason to suspect. The nights were long. He slept little, always alert to any strange noise, always ready to come up with an excuse in case someone showed up unexpectedly. But most of the time, nothing happened. The gym was silent, and Walter stayed there alone with his thoughts and memories. During the day, he pretended everything was fine. He greeted people. He did his workout. He maintained his dignity. Because in the end, that was all he had left. The dignity of a man who refused to give up, who refused to become just another sad statistic of someone who lost everything in old age. The instructors like Ryan and Tyler didn't know any of this, of course. To them, Walter was just a strange old man who trained too much and spoke too little, someone to ignore, or worse, someone to turn into a joke in moments of boredom. What they didn't know, and perhaps would never know unless someone told them, was that Walter Thompson had been a national weightlifting champion 45 years ago. He had stood on a podium wearing the colors of the United States. He had shaken hands with important people. He had had his face in local newspapers, but that was in another life. A life that seemed so distant now that sometimes he himself doubted it had really happened, as if that strong young man full of dreams was a completely different person from the man who now slept hidden in a locker room. Walter walked over to the water fountain area and filled his small bottle. The cold water went down his throat and brought momentary relief. He looked at his reflection in the glass of the door leading to the reception. A 70-year-old man looked back, completely white hair cut very short, a face marked by the lines that time insists on drawing, but the body still maintained that structure that decades of disciplined training had built. He wasn't big like modern bodybuilders. He didn't have those exaggerated muscles that seem to inflate beyond the natural, but he had definition. He had real, functional strength, the kind that isn't just for show. It was the strength of someone who had worked hard his whole life, of someone who knew his own body like a craftsman knows his tools. "Mr. Walter!" The voice pulled him from his thoughts. He turned and saw Miss Zoe, the woman who cleaned the gym lobby every morning. She was a small woman, probably in her mid-60s, always with a scarf on her head and a gentle smile on her face. "Miss Zoe," he greeted with a nod. "I saw what happened there," she said, lowering her voice as if about to share a secret. "Those boys are very disrespectful. I'm glad you showed them they can't look down on others like that." Walter gave a small smile. It was rare to find someone who spoke to him as if he were a real person, not just an obstacle in the way. "They're young," he said. "Young people make mistakes." "Young or old, everyone needs to have respect," Miss Zoe retorted, placing her hand on her hip. "My late husband always said that respect is the only currency that never loses its value." They stood there for a few moments, in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable. Walter sensed that Miss Zoe wanted to say something more, but was hesitating. "You," she began, then stopped. "Sorry, it's none of my business." "Go ahead," Walter encouraged. "It's just that I've seen you around here at very odd hours. The other day I came to get a document I'd forgotten. It was almost midnight, and I swear I saw someone who looked like you near the men's locker room." Walter's heart raced, but he kept his expression neutral. He couldn't let the panic he felt show. "Must have been someone else," he said, keeping his tone casual. "I always leave early." Miss Zoe studied him with those dark eyes that seemed to see more than they should. Then she nodded slowly. "All right, Mr. Walter. If you say so, I believe you," she said. But there was something in her voice that suggested she didn't completely believe. "I just wanted you to know that if you ever need anything, you can count on me. Those of us who work here, we need to look out for each other, right?" Before Walter could respond, the two young instructors appeared from the hallway leading to Hannah's office. Ryan was visibly upset, his face red and his steps heavy. Tyler came behind, looking more worried than angry. They walked right past Walter and Miss Zoe without a word, but at the last second, Ryan stopped and turned. "This isn't over, old man," he said, pointing his finger. "You might have fooled everyone today, but I know there's something wrong with you, and I'm going to find out what it is." "Ryan, let it go," Tyler tried to intervene, pulling his friend by the arm. "I'm not letting it go. This old man shows up out of nowhere, hangs around here all day, never talks about where he lives, never talks about family. There's something very strange." Walter felt Miss Zoe shift beside him, ready to defend him, but he raised his hand slightly, asking her not to get involved. "You're upset because I lifted more weight than you," Walter said calmly. "That's understandable. A bruised ego hurts more than any pulled muscle. But don't project your insecurity onto me. I have nothing to do with your problems." Ryan took a step forward, and for a second, Walter thought the young man might do something stupid. But Tyler held him firmly and practically dragged him away, whispering something that sounded like a warning. "That boy is going to get into serious trouble one day," Miss Zoe commented when the two disappeared. He has a lot of anger inside him. Anger usually hides hurt, Walter observed. Nobody gets like that for no reason. Miss Zoe looked at him with an expression that mixed surprise and respect. You're wise, Mr. Walter. Not everyone can see others with that kind of compassion. Walter didn't consider himself particularly wise. If he were, maybe he wouldn't have lost everything. Maybe he still had his house, his daughter talking to him, some kind of future ahead that wasn't just about surviving another day. But he didn't say any of that to Miss Zoe. He just thanked her with a nod of his head and headed toward the locker rooms. He needed a shower. He needed a few minutes alone to reorganize his thoughts. The men's locker room was empty at that time of the afternoon. Most people who worked out during that time were older folks, retirees who came in the morning, or professionals who only showed up after 6 in the evening. The middle of the afternoon was a dead time, and Walter had learned to appreciate this emptiness. He opened his locker, where he kept his things. It had a simple lock, nothing that would draw attention. Inside were his change of clothes, his deodorant, his toothbrush hidden at the bottom. The small treasures of a life reduced to the essentials. As the warm water from the shower fell on his shoulders, Walter closed his eyes and tried not to think about anything. But the mind has a will of its own, especially when we're trying to calm it. He thought about Pamela. Where would she be now? Would she be happy? Would she still be angry with him? Had she found someone, gotten married, moved on with her life? He knew nothing, and this ignorance hurt more than he cared to admit. He thought about Margaret, as he always did when the loneliness became too much. She would know what to do. She always did. She was the glue that kept that small family together, the diplomat who resolved conflicts, the voice of reason when father and daughter stubbornly refused to understand each other. What do I do, Mari? He whispered into the emptiness of the locker room, knowing there would be no answer. How do I get out of this hole? The water kept falling indifferent. The world kept turning indifferent. And Walter remained there, just another old man trying to find meaning in a chapter of life that no one had taught him how to face. When he got out of the shower, he felt a little better physically, but the emotional weight was still there, familiar and constant like a backpack he could never take off his shoulders. He dressed slowly, put his things back in the locker, and left the locker room. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. He did a few more exercises, lighter this time, focusing on stretching and mobility. Then he sat in one of the rest areas and pretended to read an old magazine someone had left there. Around 6 in the evening, the gym started to fill up. It was rush hour when employees from nearby offices showed up, eager to make up for a whole day sitting in front of computers. The noise increased, all the treadmills were occupied, and Walter became just another person in the crowd. He watched people while pretending to read. There was a young couple working out together, laughing between sets. A middle-aged woman sweating on the stationary bike, while watching something on her phone with headphones. A group of teenagers who were clearly there more to socialize than to work out, taking selfies and talking loudly. Normal lives, people with homes to return to, with families waiting, with plans for the weekend. Things Walter once had, and that now seemed like unattainable luxuries. That's when he saw her. Hannah, the gym owner, had come out of her office and was walking through the main hall. She was a woman who must have been in her 50s, always impeccably dressed, with that bearing of someone used to being in charge. Walter had seen her a few times since he started coming to the place, but he had never exchanged more than a polite greeting with her. This time, however, she was looking directly at him, and she was coming his way. Walter felt a chill in his stomach. Had she found out? Had the security cameras caught him staying after hours? Could it be that Miss Zoe, despite her kindness, had reported her suspicions? Mr. Walter Thompson, isn't it? Hannah stopped in front of him, and Walter noticed she had a folder in her hand. Yes, ma'am, he replied, standing up out of politeness. Could you come with me to my office? I'd like to talk to you about something important. It wasn't a request. Walter swallowed dryly and nodded. His heart raced as he followed Hannah down the hallway. Mentally, he was already preparing excuses, explanations, anything that could prevent her from kicking him out of there, because if he lost the gym, he would literally lose everything. He would no longer have a place to shower, to pass the time, to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Hannah's office was spacious and well decorated. There was a large dark wood desk, shelves with trophies and certificates, and an entire wall taken up by monitors showing the footage from security cameras spread throughout the gym. "Please have a seat." She indicated a comfortable chair in front of the desk. Walter obeyed, his hands slightly sweaty. Hannah placed the folder on the desk but didn't open it immediately. Instead, she studied him for a long moment. "Do you know why I called you in here?" she finally asked. "I imagine it has to do with today's incident," Walter replied, choosing his words carefully. "Partly," Hannah nodded. "I saw everything on the cameras. I saw my employees provoking you. I saw you accept the challenge. And I saw the shocked looks on everyone's faces when you lifted that weight." She paused, as if expecting him to say something. But Walter remained silent. "Do you have any idea," Hannah continued, "how many times I've had to talk to those two young men about professional behavior? How many complaints I've received from other clients about the way they treat people?" "No, ma'am." "Many times, Mr. Walter, many times. And today was the last straw. I suspended them for a week without pay. But that's not why I called you in here." Hannah finally opened the folder and pulled out an old photo, yellowed with time. It was a newspaper photo, and Walter felt his stomach churn when he saw what it was. "That's you, isn't it?" she asked, showing the image of a sturdy young man with a medal on his chest, smiling at the camera. Walter looked at that photo as if it were a ghost from the past come back to haunt him. It was indeed him, 45 years younger, at a time when the world seemed full of possibilities. "National Weightlifting Champion 1980, Hannah read the caption. "Walter Thompson, 25 years old, breaks the United States record in the up to 82 kilograms category." "How did you get this photo?" Walter asked, his voice coming out hoarser than he intended. "I researched," Hannah replied simply. "After what I saw today, I got curious. I typed your full name into the computer and found some old articles. You were quite well known back then, it seems. That was a long time ago. But talent like that doesn't disappear," Hannah said. "You're still strong, still capable, and that got me thinking." She put the photo back in the folder and leaned back in her chair, her fingers interlaced on the desk. "Mr. Walter, I'll be direct with you. I know you're going through hard times. I don't know the details, and I don't need to know unless you want to tell me. But I have eyes. I see you here practically all day, every day. I see that you never go out for lunch. I see the worn-out clothes you wear." Walter felt his face heat up with shame. So she had noticed. Of course she had. He had been a fool to think he could maintain his invisibility for so long. "I didn't bring you here to humiliate you," Hannah said quickly, noticing his discomfort. "I came to make a proposal. A proposal. I need someone to take care of the gym's security and maintenance during the night. Someone responsible, who knows the place, who can keep an eye on everything from 11 at night until 5 in the morning. The pay isn't much, but it's a fixed salary. And you could, if you wanted, use one of the rooms we have in the basement. There's one that was being used as storage but could be adapted. It has its own bathroom and everything." Walter was speechless. He looked at Hannah, trying to figure out if this was real or if he was dreaming awake. "Why are you doing this?" he managed to ask. Hannah smiled, and for the first time Walter saw something beyond the cold, professional businesswoman. He saw humanity. "Because 30 years ago," she said softly, "I was an 8-year-old child who almost drowned in the sports club pool, and a young instructor pulled me out and saved me. I never really knew his name. My parents rushed me out of there, and I never went back. But I remember his face. And when I saw that old photo of yours, when I saw your eyes, I recognized you." Walter felt the world spin slightly. He remembered that day. He remembered the little girl with braids who had gone into the deep end without knowing how to swim. He remembered jumping in with his clothes on and everything, pulling her out, seeing her coughing but alive. "That was you," he whispered. "It was me," Hannah confirmed, and her eyes were shining. "And I owe my life to you, so now let me repay you. Accept the job. Accept a decent place to stay. And maybe, who knows, we can do more than that. Maybe we can find your daughter." "How do you know about my daughter?" "I researched, remember?" Hannah shrugged. "I found an old article that mentioned your family. And I saw that you don't wear a ring. But you have the mark of someone who wore one for decades. I saw that you sometimes look at your phone as if expecting a call that never comes. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together. Walter couldn't hold back the tears. They came suddenly, warm and honest, carrying months of repressed pain. He covered his face with his hands, ashamed to break down like that in front of a stranger. But Hannah wasn't a stranger, was she? She was the girl he had saved. She was proof that a good deed, even forgotten, could come back when you needed it most. "I'm sorry," he managed to say between sobs. "There's nothing to be sorry for." Hannah stood up and came around the desk, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You saved me when I was a child. Now let me help you. It's the least I can do." And in that moment, in that room with its security monitors and trophies on the wall, Walter Thompson felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt hope. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The news of Ryan and Tyler's suspension spread through the gym faster than wildfire in dry grass. The next day, when Walter arrived to train at the usual time, the atmosphere was different. People looked at him with a mix of curiosity and respect that hadn't been there before. Miss Zoe was one of the first to approach him, her face lit up by a genuine smile. "Heard the news, Mr. Walter," she said, almost whispering as if sharing a secret. "Miss Hannah told everyone that you're going to work here now. How wonderful, huh?" "News travels fast around here," Walter commented, but there was no irritation in his voice. In fact, he felt a strange relief. He didn't have to hide anymore. He didn't have to pretend anymore. "Ah, you know how it is." Miss Zoe shrugged. "Small place, everyone wants to know about everyone else's lives. But I'm happy for you. You deserve something good in life." The room Hannah had offered wasn't large, but to Walter, it felt like a palace. It had a single bed, a small closet, a table with one chair and a tiny but functional bathroom. The walls were bare, painted white, and there was a small window overlooking the back parking lot. He didn't have much to bring. Everything he owned fit into 2 plastic bags. Clothes, documents, some personal items he'd managed to save from the house sale, a wedding photo, another of Pamela as a baby, small pieces of what used to be a complete life. While putting away his things, Walter caught himself thinking about how life could change so fast. 1 week ago he was sleeping hidden in the locker room, afraid of being discovered. Now he had a room, a job, and for the first time in months, a reason to wake up that wasn't just about surviving another day. But the happiness came mixed with something more complex. Guilt, perhaps, or shame. How had he fallen so low? How had a national champion, a man who'd once been strong and respected, ended up depending on others' charity? Hannah, as if she could read his thoughts, appeared in the doorway. "May I come in?" she asked. "It's your establishment," Walter replied. "But it's your room now," she corrected, entering anyway. "I wanted to explain your duties better. The work isn't hard. You need to do rounds through the gym every hour, check that all doors and windows are locked, make sure nothing's out of place. There's an alarm panel at the reception that you'll learn to use. And if any emergency happens, you call me directly." "I understand," Walter nodded. "And there's one more thing," Hannah hesitated. "I know you don't want charity. I know you're a proud man, and I respect that. But I need you to understand this isn't charity. I really need someone trustworthy here during the night. I've had problems before, things disappearing, people trying to break in. You're doing me a favor as much as I'm doing you one." Walter studied her. There was sincerity in her eyes, but he also noticed she was choosing her words carefully, trying not to hurt his pride. It was kind of her, even though both knew the truth was more complicated. "Thank you," he said simply, because he didn't know what other words could express the whirlwind of emotions he felt. "You're welcome," Hannah smiled. "Oh, and one more thing about your daughter. If you want, I can try to help find her. I have some contacts, nothing official or anything, but I can make some discreet calls." "I'm not sure that's a good idea," Walter said slowly. "Pamela made it very clear she doesn't want to talk to me." "But do you want to talk to her?" "Every day." His voice came out heavy with emotion. "Every single day." Then let's find her, Hannah said with determination. I can't promise it will be easy, or that she'll want to listen, but at least you'll have tried. After Hannah left, Walter sat on the new bed and looked around his new home. It was strange. After months of floating, he suddenly had ground under his feet again. It wasn't much, but it was his. He pulled the cell phone from his pocket, that old device that had seen better days. He opened the photo gallery, something he avoided doing because it hurt too much. There was Pamela at various stages of life. Pamela as a child, with a missing tooth and a huge smile. Pamela as a teenager, with that long hair she loved and that Margaret spent hours brushing. Pamela as an adult, graduated, beautiful, independent. And then, the last photo he had of her. It had been taken 1 month before Margaret passed away, the three of them together at a Sunday lunch. None of them knew that would be one of their last moments as a complete family. "Where are you, daughter?" Walter whispered to his phone screen. "What happened to us?" The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Walter trained a bit, more out of habit than necessity. He talked with Miss Zoe, who was extremely excited about the news of having a night watchman. He got to know some of the other employees better, people he saw every day but had never really talked to. There was a receptionist, Andrea, who was especially friendly. She was about 30, with curly hair tied in a ponytail, and an efficient way of dealing with customers that impressed Walter. "So you're the famous champion," she said when he passed by the reception. "I saw the photo. You were quite the looker in your youth, huh?" Walter blushed slightly, unsure how to respond to the unexpected compliment. "That was a long time ago," he said, the automatic response he always gave whenever someone mentioned his past. "Ah, but talent doesn't age." Andrea winked. "And from what I saw yesterday, you still have plenty of fire left in you." She was funny and light-hearted, and Walter realized he enjoyed her company. It was good to talk to someone who didn't treat him like a poor soul, who didn't walk on eggshells around him. When night finally came, Walter prepared for his first official shift as a night watchman. Hannah had stayed with him until 11, showing him all the procedures, explaining the alarm system, showing him where the flashlights and extra keys were. "Any problem, anything at all, call me," she repeated for the 3rd time before leaving, no matter the time. And then Walter was alone. But this time it was different. This time he wasn't hiding. This time he belonged there. The gym at night had a strange energy. The equipment that during the day was always in use, always making noise, now stood silent and still like sculptures. The emergency lights cast long shadows in the corners. The low hum of the air conditioner was the only constant sound. Walter made his first round. He walked through all the floors, checked all the doors, tested all the windows. Everything was in order. The gym was secure, closed off from the outside world. When he returned to his room, it was almost midnight. He made a simple tea in the small electric kettle that Hannah had left for him. He sat in the chair near the window and looked out at the empty parking lot. The loneliness hit him suddenly, like a cold wave. Because when it came down to it, there he was, a 70-year-old man alone in a tiny room with a job he never imagined he would have at this age. He had been a champion. He had had a family. He had had a whole life that had somehow slipped through his fingers like sand. But at least now he had a roof over his head. At least now he had a purpose, even if small. And that had to be enough. It had to be. The rest of that first night passed without incident. Walter made his hourly rounds, checked everything twice, and at some point in the middle of the night, sitting at the reception desk, he ended up dozing off for a few minutes. He woke up to the sound of keys at the door. It was Andrea arriving to open the gym. "Good morning, Mr. Walter," she greeted cheerfully. "Survived your first night, huh?" "It was quiet," he replied, rubbing his eyes. "It's usually like that," she said, as she turned on the lights and computers. "The nights here are pretty calm. The problem is when there's a holiday and the neighborhood punks decide to come mess around. But then we usually know and stay more alert." Walter went back to his room, took a shower, changed clothes. He had a few hours before he needed to start his daily training. He could rest a bit. He could, for the first time in months, relax without fear of being discovered or kicked out. He lay down on the bed and despite all the thoughts swirling in his head, sleep came surprisingly fast. And there were no nightmares. There came peaceful dreams of simpler times. The days went by, and Walter adapted to his new routine. He worked from 11 at night until 5 in the morning, slept until around 9, had breakfast at a nearby diner that sold bread with butter and black coffee for a fair price, and then returned to the gym to train. The people were becoming friendlier. The respect he had earned that day when he lifted the weight in front of everyone seemed to have created a new dynamic. Older clients began seeking him out for training tips. Some of the staff stopped to chat about random things. But Ryan and Tyler were still a problem. When the two returned from suspension, they were noticeably different. Ryan especially seemed to carry a rage that bordered on obsession. He looked at Walter with a hatred that seemed disproportionate to what had actually happened. Tyler, on the other hand, seemed more thoughtful. One afternoon he even approached Walter while the old man was stretching. "Mr. Walter, can I talk to you?" he asked, hands in his pockets, looking around as if afraid of being seen. "Of course," Walter replied, finishing his stretch and standing up. "I wanted to apologize," Tyler said quickly, the words coming out in a single stream. "For the way I treated you. For the way we always treated you. It was wrong. I know it was wrong." Walter studied the young man. Tyler must have been about 25, maybe less. He had that restless youthfulness about him, as if always in a hurry to get somewhere. "I accept your apology," Walter said. "But tell me one thing, why did you do it? Why pick someone like me to look down on?" Tyler lowered his eyes, clearly ashamed. "I don't know. I think we saw you here every day, quiet, not mixing with anyone. And Ryan would start with the jokes, and I went along because it was easier than confronting him. But that doesn't justify it. I know it doesn't justify it." "Does Ryan have some problem with me specifically?" Walter asked. "Because it seems too personal to be just teasing." Tyler hesitated, biting his lower lip. "It's complicated," he finally said. "Ryan, he has a tough history. His father was an athlete too, you know, a weightlifter. Ryan grew up hearing stories about how amazing his father was, how he was going to be a champion. But then something happened, I don't know exactly what, and his father lost everything. Started drinking, became a different person, and Ryan grew up with that trauma, that anger of not having the father he should have had." Walter felt something churn in his stomach. "And what's his father's name?" "Richard," Tyler answered. "Richard Cooper. Do you know him?" Walter knew. Of course he knew. Richard had been his coach 40 years ago. He had been his friend, his mentor, until Walter discovered that Richard was taking bribes to manipulate competition results. When Walter had confronted him and threatened to expose everything, Richard had disappeared from the sports world. "I knew his father," Walter said calmly, though inside he was in turmoil. "But that was a long time ago." "Ryan doesn't know you knew his father," Tyler said quickly. "He never researched your name or anything. But I think there's something in him that sees you and remembers his father, you know, like the father should have been but wasn't." "That explains a lot," Walter murmured. After Tyler left, Walter stood there, processing this new information. Ryan was Richard's son. The kid who taunted him, who looked down on him, was the son of the man who had betrayed his trust decades ago. The world was too small sometimes, too small and too cruel. That night, during his rounds, Walter kept thinking about Richard. He hadn't thought about that man in years. He had buried that memory along with so many other things from the past, but now it was resurfacing, bringing with it old wounds he thought had healed. Richard had been like an older brother to him. He was the one who taught him not just how to lift weights, but to love the sport. He had been by his side in every competition, shouting encouragement, giving advice, celebrating every victory. And then Walter had discovered the truth. He had found documents, overheard conversations he shouldn't have heard. He had realized that some of his results, some of his victories, might not have been as honest as he thought. The confrontation had been terrible. Richard first denied everything. Then he tried to justify it. He said he was just leveling the playing field, that everyone did it, that if he didn't, Walter would never stand a chance against the other athletes who also cheated. But Walter didn't accept those excuses. He wanted to win for real or not win at all. And when he threatened to tell everything to the authorities, Richard simply disappeared. Walter never knew what had happened to him after that. He never tried to find out. It was easier to pretend that chapter was closed, but now he discovered that Richard had a son, and that this son had grown up in the shadow of a broken and bitter father. And somehow, incomprehensibly, Walter felt guilty about it. Was it his fault that Richard had fallen apart? If he had let things be, had turned a blind eye to the corruption, would Richard have kept working and been a better father to Ryan? But at the same time, he knew he couldn't think that way. Doing the right thing didn't always bring rewards. Sometimes doing the right thing just created more pain, more complications, more unanswered questions. It was during these reflections that Walter heard a strange noise. He was on the second floor of the gym near the cardio area when he heard the sound of something being dragged downstairs. It was 2 in the morning. There shouldn't be anyone in the building besides him. His heart raced. His first reaction was to grab his phone to call Hannah as she had instructed, but something made him hesitate. What if it was just a cat that had gotten in? What if it was the wind knocking something over? He decided to investigate first. He went down the stairs quietly, flashlight in hand. The sound was coming from the reception area. As he approached, Walter could make out low voices. At least 2 people. He peered carefully around the corner of the wall and saw 2 figures messing with the reception computer. They were using their phone flashlights, and by their silhouettes Walter could see they were young. Ryan and Tyler. What were they doing there at that hour? Walter watched for a few minutes, trying to understand. The 2 seemed to be looking for something in the computer files, opening folders, closing others. Ryan seemed frustrated, typing too hard on the keys. "It has to be here somewhere," he whispered to Tyler. "Miss Hannah keeps all the financial records on this computer." "Dude, this is crazy," Tyler replied, clearly nervous. "If we get caught here..." "We won't get caught. The old man is doing rounds upstairs, and when he comes down, we hide." "And why do we need this information again?" "Because I need money, Tyler. I really need it. My dad owes a lot of people. If I don't get at least $5,000 this week, bad things are going to happen." Walter felt his chest tighten. So it wasn't just stubbornness or malice. Ryan was desperate. He was trying to save his father, but he was doing it the wrong way. Walter made a quick decision. He turned on the main light suddenly, making both boys jump. "What are you doing here?" he asked, keeping his voice firm but not aggressive. Ryan stared at him with a mix of fear and defiance. "That's none of your business, old man." "Yes, it is my business. I work here. I'm responsible for the security of this place, and you're trespassing on private property and messing with confidential files." "You don't understand," Ryan began, but his voice trembled. "My father..." "I know about your father," Walter interrupted. "I know he's going through a tough time. But this isn't the solution." Ryan looked at him with genuine surprise. "How do you know about my father?" "Because I knew Richard Cooper," Walter said. "Knew him very well. He was my coach 40 years ago." The silence that fell over them was heavy and thick. Ryan stared at Walter as if he were seeing a ghost. "You're Walter Thompson," he whispered finally. "You're the guy who destroyed my father." "It wasn't quite like that," Walter began. "Yes, it was," Ryan exploded, taking a step forward. "My father told me how you accused him of things he didn't do, how you spread lies and ruined his career. Because of you, he started drinking. Because of you, our family fell apart." "Ryan, you don't know the whole story." Walter tried to stay calm. "Your father was doing wrong things. He was taking money to manipulate competitions. I had proof. Lies, all lies." Ryan was almost shouting now, tears welling up. "My father would never do that. You were the one jealous of him. You were envious." Tyler tried to hold his friend back, pulling him by the arm. "Ryan, let's go. This isn't going to lead anywhere." But Ryan broke free violently. "No, I'm not leaving here without saying what I need to." He pointed his finger at Walter. "You destroyed my father. And now you show up here all nice and neat, being the hero, working for Miss Hannah. But I know who you really are. I know you're a liar, a traitor." The words fell on Walter like stones. He understood the boy's pain. He understood the desperation of wanting to believe that the father was a hero, not a villain, but he couldn't let Ryan keep destroying his own life because of lies from the past. "Is your father having trouble with debts?" Walter asked, abruptly changing the subject. Ryan blinked, confused by the shift. "Yes, so what? How much does he owe?" $5,000, Ryan replied defiantly. "And before you ask, it's none of your business." "And you were looking for financial information here to do what exactly? Steal from the academy? Blackmail Hannah?" Ryan didn't answer, but the guilt on his face said it all. "That's not you," Walter said softly. "You may be angry, you may be desperate, but you're not a thief. And doing this will only prove that your father was right to drink to forget, because his son turned into exactly the kind of person he tried not to be." It was a low blow, Walter knew. But sometimes the hard truth was necessary. Ryan broke down, and broke. Literally collapsed to the floor, his back against the reception desk, sobbing like a child. "I don't know what to do anymore," he cried. "My father is going to be hurt if he doesn't pay, and he doesn't have the money. Lost everything to drinking. And I don't make enough here, I don't make enough anywhere." Tyler crouched beside his friend, putting a hand on his shoulder. Walter watched the two boys and saw not just them, but all the children of all the fathers who made mistakes. They were victims of choices they didn't make, of wars they didn't start. "Give me 2 days," Walter said finally. 2 days and I'll see what I can do to help your father." Ryan lifted his tear-streaked face. "Why would you help? After everything I did?" "Because you remind me of my daughter," Walter said, and the truth of those words hit him as he spoke them. "Pamela is angry with me too. She also blames me for things she doesn't fully understand. And if someone helped her when she needed it, even if she didn't deserve it, I would be grateful. So that's what I'm doing. I'm helping because I hope someone out there will also help my daughter when she needs it." The three stood there in silence for a long moment. Then Walter made the two boys leave, but not before making Ryan promise he wouldn't do anything stupid again. When he was alone once more, Walter sat in the reception chair and stared at the ceiling. He had promised something he didn't know if he could deliver. He didn't have $5,000. He barely had 500. But he needed to find a way. For the rest of the night, his mind worked on finding solutions, and it was while doing his last round just before 5 in the morning that he saw something. On one of the bulletin boards near the locker rooms, there was an old, somewhat torn poster. It was advertising a weightlifting competition for the senior category. First place paid $10,000. The competition was in 3 weeks. Walter took the poster off the wall and studied it. It was organized by a local sports association. It required pre-registration. It had categories divided by age and weight. He could do this. He could train. He could compete. And if he won... But it had been so long. 40 years since his last official competition. His body wasn't the same anymore. He was strong, yes, he kept in shape, but competing was something else. It was pressure. It was perfect technique. It was overcoming not just the weight, but also your own demons. Still, it might be the only chance. The next morning, Walter looked for Hannah before going to sleep. "I needed to talk to you about something," he said. Hannah was having coffee in her office, reviewing spreadsheets on the computer. "Of course, Walter. Have a seat." "Want some coffee?" "No, thank you." He sat down, holding the poster in his hands. "I found this yesterday, a weightlifting competition." Hannah took the poster and read it. Senior Plus, over 65 years old. "Interesting." She looked up at him. "Are you thinking of competing?" "Maybe," Walter admitted, "but it's not for me. It's for the boys, Ryan and Tyler." And then he told her everything, about finding the two trying to access the files, about Ryan's father's debt, about his promise to help. Hannah listened to everything in silence, her expression growing more and more serious. "They tried to break into my files," she said when Walter finished. "They tried but didn't succeed. And I think Ryan was desperate, not malicious. Still, that's serious, Walter. I know, but they're young. They make mistakes. And if we don't give them a chance, they'll make worse mistakes." Hannah was silent for a long moment, drumming her fingers on the desk. "All right," she said finally. I won't fire them, but they'll have to work to make up for it. And you, if you want to compete, I'll support you. I'll even sponsor your registration and pay for any equipment you need. You don't have to do that, Walter began. I know I don't have to, Hannah smiled, but I want to. And besides, if you win, it'll be great advertising for the gym. 70-year-old client wins competition. Imagine the headline. Walter couldn't help but smile too. When was the last time you competed? Hannah asked. 40 years ago, 1980. And do you think you still can? Walter thought for a moment. There's only one way to find out. And so began a new phase in Walter's life. He started training, not just to stay in shape, but with a specific goal. Tyler surprisingly offered help. I know I messed up, the young man said, embarrassed, but I really am good at what I do. I can set up a specific training plan for you. No charge, of course. It's the least I can do. Ryan took longer to show up. When he finally did, 3 days after the incident, he seemed like a different person. His eyes were swollen as if he hadn't slept for nights. He had a hunched, defeated posture. My father was hospitalized, he said bluntly when he met Walter. He had a liver problem because of drinking. He's in the public hospital. And his debt grew because he didn't pay on time. Now it's $8,000. Walter felt his chest tighten. I don't have that money right now, he said honestly. But if I win the competition, I'll give it to you. It's a promise. Why would you do that? Ryan asked, and there was genuine pain in his voice. After everything I did, after what my father did to you. Because your father and I have a complicated history, Walter replied. But you have nothing to do with it. And no child should pay for their father's mistakes. I know that better than anyone. What do you mean? Walter hesitated, but then decided to be honest. My daughter hasn't spoken to me for 7 months. We fought over her late mother's inheritance. I made choices that seemed right at the time but ended up hurting her. And now she hates me. So when I look at you, I see a son suffering because of his father. And I don't want more of that pain in the world. There's already too much. Ryan stayed silent for a long time. Then, surprisingly, he extended his hand. I'll help you train too, he said. I'll do everything I can for you to win this competition, because you're my father's only hope now. Walter shook the young man's hand and felt something heal a little inside him. It didn't erase the past. It didn't solve everything. But it was a start. The preparation for the competition was intense. Tyler and Ryan set up a strict schedule. They woke up early to train with Walter before the gym officially opened. They focused on technique, breathing, perfect posture. You have strength, Tyler explained while adjusting Walter's hand position on the bar. But in a competition, it's not just strength. It's precision. One wrong move, and you're disqualified. And there's the psychological aspect, Ryan added. When everyone's watching, when the pressure mounts, many people freeze. You need to train not just the body, but the mind. Walter absorbed everything like a sponge. It was strange to be getting guidance from boys who could be his grandchildren, but they were good. They really knew what they were doing. And more importantly, they were dedicated. Miss Zoe became a regular at the morning training sessions, bringing fruits and fresh water. You need to eat right, Mr. Walter, she insisted. It's no use training if there's no fuel in your body. Andrea from the front desk started promoting the story on the gym's social media. She posted short videos of the training, photos of the progress, little inspiring texts about it never being too late to dream. This is going to go viral. I guarantee it, she said excitedly, her eyes glued to her phone. People love comeback stories. And it did go viral. Suddenly the gym started receiving visits from people who had seen the posts. Local journalists showed up wanting to do interviews. A small news portal wrote an article titled, "Former Champion at 70 Trains for Competition Comeback." Hannah was radiant with all the positive publicity. Gym memberships increased. More people wanted to train at the place where the old champion trained. But not everything was rosy. As the days passed and the competition approached, Walter felt the weight of the pressure. It wasn't just for him. It was for Ryan and his father. It was for everyone who now believed in him. It was for the chance to prove he still had value. There was one night, 2 weeks before the competition, when he almost gave up everything. He was doing his nightly rounds when he felt a sharp pain in his right shoulder. It wasn't normal. It was different from the usual muscle soreness from training. It was something deeper, more concerning. He tried to ignore it, but the pain persisted. It got worse. 3 days later, he could barely lift his arm above his head. "You need to see a doctor," Hannah insisted when she noticed he was limping in his movement. "I don't have money for a doctor," Walter replied, frustration evident in his voice. "I'll pay," she said simply. "No arguments. Let's go now." The doctor, a man in his 50s who worked in a modest office near the gym, examined Walter carefully. "You have tendon inflammation," he explained, "probably from overtraining. At your age, you need to be more careful." "I have a competition in 10 days, Walter said. "Then you'll have to drop out," the doctor replied bluntly. "If you push it now, you could cause permanent damage." "I can't drop out. Mr. Walter, I understand this is important to you, but health comes first." Walter left the office with a prescription for anti-inflammatories and orders to stop intense training for at least 3 weeks. 3 weeks. But he didn't have 3 weeks, he had 10 days. Hannah tried to convince him to drop out on the way back. "It's not worth risking your health," she argued. "We can get the money another way. I can start a fundraiser, I can borrow from Ryan." "It's not just about the money," Walter said, looking out the car window. "It's to prove something. To myself. To everyone who underestimated me. To my daughter, wherever she is." "But what if you get permanently injured?" "Then at least I'll have tried." In the following days, Walter trained in secret. He took the anti-inflammatories to endure the pain. He used ice packs after each session. He ignored the protests from Tyler and Ryan, who noticed something was wrong. "You're not well," Ryan said, worried. "You can tell by the way you're moving." "I'm well enough," Walter insisted, but he knew he wasn't. Every lift sent waves of pain through his shoulder. Every movement was a battle against his own body. He was 70 years old, not 25. His body didn't recover the same way anymore. The limitations were real. It was Miss Zoe who finally got through to him. She found him in the locker room one night, holding his shoulder with the pained expression he tried to hide. "Mr. Walter, I need to be serious with you," she said, sitting next to him on the bench. "Miss Zoe." "Let me speak first," she interrupted. "You're killing yourself over this competition, and I understand why. I understand you want to prove your worth. I understand you want to help those boys. But you need to understand one thing. Your worth isn't in how much weight you can lift." "Then where is it?" "It's in the kind of person you are," Miss Zoe said softly. "It's in the fact that you forgave those boys even after everything they did. It's in the fact that you want to help one of their fathers even though that father betrayed you in the past. It's in the fact that you wake up every day and keep fighting even when it would be easier to give up." Walter felt his eyes burn. "But if I don't compete, how will I help Ryan?" "We'll figure it out," Miss Zoe said. "We always figure it out. But you alive and healthy is worth more than any prize money." They sat there for a long time, in companionable silence. And Walter, for the first time in weeks, allowed himself to consider the possibility of dropping out. But before he could make a decision, Miss Zoe spoke again. "You know what my husband used to say, that sometimes we have to choose between being strong and being wise, and that the real heroes are the ones who know when it's time to make each of those choices. And what do you think is the wise choice now?" Walter asked. "I think only you can answer that." That night, Walter couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, weighing his options. On one hand, common sense told him to give up, take care of his health, accept the limitations of age. On the other, something deeper screamed that he needed to do it, that it was his last chance to prove something not just to others but to himself. In the early morning, still awake, he picked up his phone and opened the photo gallery. He scrolled through pictures of Pamela, each one bringing a different memory. He stopped at a specific photo taken when she was about 12. It was her birthday, and she was holding a small trophy she had won in a school swimming competition. What he remembered most about that day wasn't the trophy. It was the way Pamela had looked at him, full of pride, and said, "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you." Walter hadn't thought about those words in years, but now they came back with full force. Pamela had admired him, had seen him as an example of strength, and at some point he had stopped being that example. He had stopped being the strong father. He had become just a bitter, lost old man. But what if he could be strong again? Not just physically, but in spirit. What if he could show her wherever she was that he hadn't given up, that he was fighting? When the sun rose, Walter had already made his decision. He would compete. He would take care of his shoulder as much as possible until then. But he would compete. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The last days before the competition were a mix of anxiety and frantic preparation. Walter's shoulder improved a bit with forced rest and medication, but he knew it wasn't 100%. At best, it was 70%. He would have to compensate with technique and determination. Andrea from the front desk had organized practically a whole cheering squad to go to the competition. Miss Zoe was mobilizing the entire family. Hannah had chartered a small bus to take interested gym clients. Even some of the older members, who usually only came in the morning for light treadmill walks, had confirmed their presence. "You've become a local celebrity, Mr. Walter," Andrea joked, while showing him the comments on social media. "There are people from other neighborhoods coming to watch." The pressure was immense, but strangely, Walter felt calmer than expected. Maybe it was age bringing some wisdom. Maybe it was simply the acceptance that, win or lose, he had already achieved something important. He had reconnected with a part of himself he thought was dead. The day before the competition, Ryan showed up in Walter's room with a package in his hands. "I brought something for you," he said hesitantly. Walter opened it and found a competition uniform. It was simple but new, in blue and white colors. "Where did you get this?" Walter asked, touching the fabric. "I saved up, me and Tyler. We thought you deserved to compete in your own uniform, not a borrowed one." Walter looked at the young man and saw more than just a troubled young instructor. He saw someone trying to be better, trying to make amends. "How is your father?" he asked. "Getting better," Ryan replied, and there was genuine relief in his voice. "His liver will recover according to the doctors, but he needs to stop drinking completely, and he needs to deal with his debts." "And is he willing to do that?" Ryan hesitated. "I think so. I talked a lot with him this week, and for the first time in my life we had a real conversation, you know? No lies. He told me about you, about what really happened in the past." Walter prepared himself to hear accusations, but Ryan continued. "He admitted he was wrong, that he took a bribe, that he tried to manipulate your competitions without you knowing. He said when you found out and confronted him, he was so ashamed he chose to disappear rather than face the consequences." "He told you that?" "He did. And he apologized. Not to you, you weren't there, but to me. For lying all these years, for raising me to believe you were the villain when in fact the villain was him." Walter felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't just about being right or wrong. It was about the truth finally coming out. "I wanted you to know," Ryan continued, "that regardless of tomorrow's outcome, you've already done so much for me and my father, more than we deserved." "Everyone deserves a second chance," Walter said. "Your father, you, me, all of us." That night, Walter slept better than he had in months. And when he woke up on the day of the competition, he felt not nervousness, but a kind of peace. The competition venue was a municipal gym in the city center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was reasonably full. Walter saw that Andrea hadn't been exaggerating about the cheering section. There were at least 50 people wearing shirts printed with Team Walter. Hannah found him backstage before it started. "How are you feeling?" "Ready," he answered simply. "And your shoulder?" "It'll hold up." She studied him for a moment, then smiled. "You know you don't have to win, right? You've already won by getting this far." "I know," Walter said, "but I'm still going to give it my all." The competition had 32 participants in the Senior Plus category. Men aged 65 to 80, all visibly fit, all with that determination that comes from proving age is just a number. Walter watched the other competitors while waiting for his turn. There was a 73-year-old man who looked like he had the body of a 40-year-old. Another, 68, with arms like tree trunks. There was real competition here. When his name was called, Walter walked to the center of the gym. The crowd erupted in applause. He could see Miss Zoe standing, hands clasped in prayer, Ryan and Tyler in the front row shouting encouragement, Hannah filming everything on her phone, and dozens of other people, many he didn't even know, cheering for him. The initial weight was 120 kilograms. It was a weight Walter could lift relatively easily in training. But training wasn't competition. Competition had pressure. It had judging eyes. It had the fear of failure itself. He positioned himself, gripped the bar, took a deep breath as Tyler had taught him, focused not on the pain in his shoulder, but on the strength still in his body, and lifted. The weight went up cleanly. The referee gave a positive signal. The crowd roared. Second attempt, 140 kilograms. His shoulder protested more visibly this time, but Walter completed the movement. More applause, more excitement. Third and final attempt of the qualifying round, 160 kilograms. Walter looked at that loaded bar and felt a moment of doubt. It was a lot of weight, too much weight for someone his age, especially with an injured shoulder. But then he heard Ryan's voice shouting, "You can do it, Mr. Walter. You're a champion." And that was enough. Walter grabbed the bar, felt the weight trying to pull him down, felt his shoulder scream in protest, but he didn't give up. He pulled, he pushed, he fought against gravity, against age, against all the voices saying he was too old, too weak, too washed up. The bar rose. It passed shoulder height, above his head, and stayed there, trembling slightly, but there. The referee took an extra second to signal positively, checking if the position was correct. And when he finally did, the gym nearly came down with celebration. Walter lowered the bar and almost collapsed. His shoulder was throbbing terribly. He would have to take strong painkillers after this, but he had done it. The final ranking placed him in 4th place. It wasn't first. It wasn't the $10,000 prize he had planned for, but 4th place received $1,000, and more importantly, it received the recognition of having competed until the end. When he went to the podium to receive his medal, the crowd cheered as if he had won gold. And maybe, in a way, he had won something more valuable than gold. He had won back his own dignity. After the ceremony, while Walter was surrounded by people wanting to take pictures and give congratulations, he saw a familiar figure at the gymnasium entrance, a woman around 45 years old, with brown hair tied in a ponytail, wearing a simple blue blouse. She was standing there, eyes wide, mouth slightly open in shock. Pamela. His daughter had come. Walter felt his heart stop. For a second, he couldn't move. He couldn't think. He just looked at her, trying to figure out if it was real or if his mind was playing tricks on him. But then Pamela moved. She walked toward him, politely pushing past the people in her way. And when she reached him, Walter saw that she was crying. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "I saw it in the online videos. I saw that you were competing, and I had to come." "Pamela," Walter whispered, also crying now. "You came." "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm sorry for everything. For the fight, for not answering your calls, for being so hard on you. I was angry at Mom for leaving, and I put all that anger on you. And it was unfair. It was so unfair." Walter pulled her into a hug, and Pamela melted into it, crying like she hadn't since she was a child. Father and daughter finally reconnected after months of painful silence. "You don't have to apologize," Walter said, stroking her hair. "I was wrong too. I was too proud as well. But you're here now, and that's all that matters." They stayed embraced for a long time, oblivious to the crowd around them, oblivious to the cameras still filming, oblivious to everything except the fact that the family, broken for so long, was rebuilding itself. When they finally separated, Pamela wiped her tears and gave a watery smile. "You were amazing out there," she said. "I forgot how strong you were. How you've always been strong." "Not as strong as before," Walter admitted, "but strong enough." "And all this crowd?" Pamela looked around, impressed. "Did you get famous or something?" "It's a long story," Walter laughed. "I have a lot to tell you." They went to a quieter corner of the gymnasium, and Walter told her everything, about losing the house, about sleeping hidden in the locker room, about Hannah discovering him and offering the job, about Ryan and Tyler, about Richard, about the whole journey of the last few months. Pamela listened intently, her face going through various emotions. Shock when he told her about sleeping hidden. Guilt when she realized he had gone through all that alone. Admiration when she understood how he had picked himself back up. "I should have been there," she said when he finished. "I should have answered your calls. I should have—" "The past is the past," Walter gently interrupted. "Let's focus on the present and the future." "I agree," Pamela nodded. "And about that, there's something I need to tell you." She hesitated, biting her lip in a way Walter recognized from when she was a child. "I'm pregnant, Dad, 5 months along." The world stopped for Walter. Pregnant. Pamela was pregnant. He was going to be a grandfather. "A baby," he whispered. "You're going to have a baby." "I am," Pamela smiled through her tears. "And I really wanted you to meet your grandchild. I really wanted you to be a part of this baby's life." Walter pulled her into another hug, this time smiling so wide his face hurt. "You're not getting rid of me then," he said. "I'm going to be the most annoying, doting grandpa this baby could ever have." "I don't doubt it," Pamela laughed. When they finally left the gym, it was late at night. The whole crowd had gone home, but Hannah, Miss Zoe, Andrea, Ryan and Tyler were waiting outside. "This is Pamela," Walter introduced proudly. "My daughter." "Nice to meet you," Pamela greeted everyone, a bit shyly. "Thank you for taking care of my father." "Your father is the one who took care of us," Hannah replied. "He's a blessing to our gym." Ryan stepped forward, hesitant. "Mr. Walter, I know you didn't win the full prize, but what's here," he extended an envelope, "is the contribution we managed to collect. The gym's crowd, the members, everyone. We gathered $3,000. It's not the 8 my father needs, but it's a start." Walter took the envelope, moved. "This is a lot of money." He tried to give it back. "I can't accept it." "Yes, you can," Ryan insisted. "You deserve it. And besides, this money isn't just for you. It's for my father, too, to help him. It's proof that when we work together, when we support each other, we can overcome anything." "Thank you," Walter said, his voice choked up. "Really, thank you." The following weeks were about rebuilding and healing. Walter started attending physical therapy sessions for his shoulder. Pamela moved back to be near him, renting a small apartment 2 blocks from the gym. She and Walter began seeing each other regularly, rebuilding their relationship piece by piece. Walter's story continued to generate interest. A major newspaper ran a full feature on him, titled, "It's Never Too Late. 70-year-old former champion finds new life after personal tragedy." The article detailed his journey, from losing everything to competing again, and sparked a wave of support. Donations started coming in, people who identified with the story, seniors who felt inspired, families who understood the pain of separation and the joy of reconciliation. Within a month, Walter had enough money not only to pay off Ryan's father's debts, but also to start a small savings fund. Hannah even offered to increase his salary, promoting him from night watchman to senior training coordinator. "You have the knowledge," she explained, "and more importantly, you have the empathy. People your age trust you because you're one of them." Walter accepted, and so began a new phase. He created a special training program for people over 60. It focused not on competition, but on health, on maintaining independence, on proving that age is not a limitation. The program was an immediate success. Seniors from all over the neighborhood started enrolling in the gym specifically to train with Walter. He discovered he had a talent for teaching, for motivating, for making people believe they were still capable. Richard, Ryan's father, was discharged from the hospital 3 weeks after the competition. He was thinner, more fragile, but for the first time in years, he was sober. He sought out Walter on a rainy Thursday afternoon. "I came to apologize," Richard said bluntly when they met in the gym lobby. "Personally, face to face, for what I did 40 years ago and for what I let my son believe about you." Walter looked at the man who had once been his mentor and friend. Richard was unrecognizable, his face marked by years of drinking, his body bent with shame and regret. But his eyes still had that spark of intelligence Walter remembered. "I accept your apology," Walter said, "and I hope you can recover. For yourself. For Ryan." "I'm trying," Richard replied. "I've started going to meetings. I'm working as a janitor in a building. It's not much, but it's honest. And for the first time in decades, I'm honest with myself. It's a good start." "Ryan wants me to come train here," Richard hesitated. "But I don't know if you'd want—" "It would be an honor to have you as a student," Walter interrupted. "Truly, it's never too late to start over." And so Richard joined the senior classes. It was strange at first, a bit uncomfortable, but gradually he and Walter rebuilt a friendship, different from what they had before, more mature, more honest, but a friendship nonetheless. Pamela started attending the gym too. She did light exercises suitable for pregnant women, always accompanied by Walter or supervised by Tyler, who had specialized in prenatal training. It was during one of these sessions that Pamela met a young woman about 25 years old who was also pregnant. The two started talking, supporting each other, and formed a quick friendship. The young woman, named Amber, was going through difficulties. The baby's father had disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy. She lived alone, worked at a beauty salon, and was terrified at the idea of raising a child alone. Pamela, who had spent months estranged from her own father and knew how much that hurt, offered immediate help. "You're not alone," she told Amber. "We'll help you." And we became literal. Walter, Hannah, Miss Zoe, Ryan, Tyler, Andrea, the entire gym community mobilized to support Amber. They threw a surprise baby shower, bought essential items, offered practical help. "This is how things should be," Miss Zoe commented while arranging the gifts for Amber. "Us helping each other, being family even without sharing blood." On the day Pamela went into labor, 3 weeks past her due date, the gym was particularly full. It was a Saturday morning and everyone was there. Walter was in the middle of a class when his phone rang. It was the babysitter Pamela had hired to stay with her during the day, since she could no longer work. "Mr. Walter, Pamela asked me to call. Her water broke. She's going to the hospital." Time stopped. Walter looked at his students, all seniors watching him expectantly. "Will you come with me?" he asked. "My daughter is having a baby." The response was unanimous. Almost half the gym went to the hospital. The group was so large that the reception nurse was confused, trying to figure out who all these relatives were. "It's our chosen family," Walter explained with a smile. The delivery took hours, long, agonizing hours of waiting, but no one left. Everyone stayed there in the waiting room, talking, laughing, supporting each other. Amber was there too, her belly already quite large, planning for her baby to be born in 2 months. When finally a doctor came out with news, everyone stood up at once. "Are you Walter Thompson, Pamela's father?" "That's me." "Congratulations." The doctor smiled broadly. "It's a boy. Mother and baby are doing great. She wants you to come in." Walter felt his legs go weak as he followed the doctor down the halls. He was 70 years old. He had lived through a lot. He had seen a lot. But nothing prepared him for what he felt when he saw Pamela lying in the hospital bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny baby wrapped in blue blankets. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. "Want to meet your grandson?" Walter approached carefully, as if approaching something sacred. Pamela placed the baby in his arms, and Walter looked at that perfect little face, those closed eyes, that new life full of possibilities. "He's perfect," Walter whispered. "Yes," Pamela agreed. "And his name is Walter, Walter Thompson Jr." The tears came without warning. Walter held his grandson and cried all the tears he had held back for so many months. Tears of loss, of loneliness, of fear. But also tears of joy, of gratitude, of love. "Thank you," he said to Pamela, "for giving me this chance, for forgiving me, for coming back." "We should thank you," Pamela replied, "for never giving up, for staying strong, for teaching me that no matter how many times life knocks you down, you can always get back up again." When Walter finally left the room, the waiting area erupted in applause. Hannah was crying. Miss Zoe had her hands over her heart. Ryan and Tyler were jumping around like kids. Andrea was filming everything on her phone, probably already planning her next viral post. "It's a boy," Walter announced, "and his name is Walter Jr." The celebration was so loud that a nurse had to ask them to quiet down for the other patients. The following months were about adjustments. Pamela went home with the baby, and Walter split his time between working at the gym and helping with his grandson. He woke up early, did his night rounds, slept a few hours, and then spent afternoons at Pamela's house, rocking the baby, changing diapers, doing everything a doting grandfather does. Ryan kept improving. With his father in recovery and working honestly, they began rebuilding their relationship. Tyler was promoted to head instructor, and the first thing he did was create a scholarship program for low-income youth to train for free. Amber had her baby, a girl she named Margaret. When he heard the name, Walter couldn't hold back his tears again. It was his late wife's name. Amber explained she wanted to honor the woman who, even without knowing her, had created such a welcoming community through the people she loved. The gym became more than just a place to work out. It became a meeting point, a place where people of all ages helped each other, where loneliness was fought with companionship, where no one was left behind. Hannah expanded the business, opening a second location in another neighborhood, and she insisted Walter become the general coordinator for senior programs at both gyms. "You transformed this place, Cool," she said. "You transformed lives, including mine once again. You saved me when I was a child, and decades later, I got the chance to return the favor. But what you've done here goes beyond what I could have imagined." 1 year after the competition, Walter was sitting on a bench at the gym, watching his students train. A group of men and women, all over 65, all working hard, all laughing and supporting each other. Richard was there working with free weights, completely sober for 12 months. Ryan and Tyler were coaching a group of young people across the room. Miss Zoe was leading a beginner's stretching group. Andrea was organizing a charity event at the front desk. And in the middle of it all, there was life, there was community, there was purpose. Pamela appeared with Walter Jr. in her arms. The baby was 8 months old now, chubby and smiling, with the same bright eyes as his grandfather. "I came to show the champion to Grandpa," she joked, placing the baby in Walter's lap. Walter held his grandson and looked around. A year ago, he was sleeping hidden in a locker room. He was alone, lost, without purpose. He was at rock bottom. And now he had work. He had family. He had community. He had a reason to wake up every day. He had love. "You know what I learned this year?" Walter said to Pamela as the baby played with his fingers. "What? That strength isn't just about muscles. Strength is about getting up after you fall. It's about asking for help when you need it. It's about forgiving, being forgiven, starting over, and that it's never, ever too late for a second chance." Pamela smiled and rested her head on her father's shoulder. "You're the strongest person I know, Dad." "No," Walter corrected. "I was strong when I was 20 and lifting record weights. Now, I'm something better. Now, I'm human." End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story. Where are you watching from? Leave in the comments what moved you the most, whether you've been through similar situations or know someone who inspired you to never give up. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories. We love reading your messages.